All right, everyone. So good afternoon and welcome to our first Recruiter Roundtable live podcast event. Very, very excited. Today's session features a deep dive into careers in New York City tech. I'm your host, Brian Antolin, the program manager at LineRun. And we are excited to have 4 recruiting and community leaders joining us this afternoon to share their insight and perspective on careers in New York City tech. Before we get there, a little bit about what we do in our organization, LineRun. So LineRun is an experiential career and industry education platform for tomorrow's workforce. We empower our community of leaders to connect, innovate, and grow through media, events, and programs such as today's session. We invite you to check out our website, www.linerun.co, to learn more about our podcast, classes, and career accelerator programs. So we cover the gamut between helping you find careers to also helping you understand what's going on in specific verticals such as AI, and a few events on software engineering, future of product management, and data science that are coming up soon. With that, each member of our panel will briefly introduce themselves so you can get to know them and what they do a little bit better. And today we're going to start with Charlie.
Hi all, how's it going? Sorry, I had to figure out where that mute button was. One of the many pitfalls of Zoom in the pandemic. But it's a pleasure to meet everybody. My name's Charlie Keinath. I'm the head of recruiting at a company called Beeswax. What Beeswax does is we build an enterprise software as a service platform that allows brands and product marketers to be able to buy advertising in real time. Prior to being at Beeswax, I had a really awesome career at BuzzFeed, taking that team from about 27 engineers to around 200. I've worked for an alphabet company in the past. You might have used one of the Link NYC machines across the streets of Manhattan before ending up at Beeswax. Looking forward to being on the panel.
All right, and from here we're going to go over to Israel.
Hi everyone, my name is Israel. I'm Senior Manager of Talent Acquisition at the New York Times. I manage mostly our tech functions, particularly the Data and Insights group. I also recruit for product and what we call ad innovation, or sort of like technology, and engineering, data science as well. And happy to be part of the panel.
Great, we're happy to have you here. Jacob?
Sure. Hey everybody, Jacob. I work at Teachable, which is a platform that enables anyone to easily create, market, and monetize online courses and now coaching. We're about a 150-person startup. I've been here since we were about 30 people, about 3-ish years ago. I primarily focus on technical recruiting, which covers everything from engineering to product and design, although I also work with hiring managers across the board for recruiting strategy on all of our roles.
Wonderful. And last but certainly not least, Talia.
Hi everyone, my name is Talia Fayaz. I currently work as a mobile engineer at Yieldstreet. I founded a meetup called NYC Coders about 1.5 years ago to help developers tackle comp sci fundamentals by teaching them data structures and algorithms, holding tech panels, and facilitating huge hackathons. We're currently at 2,000 plus members, and I'm really happy to be here.
And we are excited to have all of you here today, and thank you so much for taking the time. I think a really good place to start is what we're all going through right now with the global pandemic and how it's really disrupted the normal course of business. I think we can agree that where we are today in June, as we're recording this, is definitely not where we were in March. And I'll start with our 3 recruiters here. Jacob, I think we'll start with you. How has your company's hiring strategy and process adapted or changed in response to these challenges and what's going on with COVID?
Sure, yeah. I think we've been in a pretty thankful position that online education has received a lot of interest and focus the last few months. So as a business, thankfully, the fundamentals of our business are pretty strong still. We've actually seen our total course sales increase pretty significantly over the last few months, from about 25 million on a monthly basis at the end of last year up to about 40 million on a monthly basis these days. So our broader hiring plans haven't shifted too much, but the way we actually go about interviewing and recruiting from a day-to-day perspective has shifted quite a bit. Obviously, we can't have anybody in our office these days, so we've shifted everything over to Zoom. It's enabled actually things to be a little bit easier from a scheduling perspective. We're not really doing too many 3 to 5 hour on-site blocks like we used to. It's a little easier to break those up into 2 to 3 45-minute sessions, which just make these things a lot easier for both candidates and interviewers. And we've taken a lot of steps, both from the candidate experience, but also for the employee experience, to try to transfer our culture into kind of the remote work lifestyle that we're all dealing with these days. So we're doing a lot of remote events that we invite candidates to. We invite candidates to sit in on like daily stand-ups or our all hands, or tonight the People Ops team is doing a donut making class. So we've invited candidates to those kind of things to try to keep them engaged. And then one other thing that we do is when we're normally in the office, we send every candidate that's coming into the office what we call an on-site packet, which has a little bit of history on the company, like a one-pager on our broader benefits, and a couple videos on kind of careers at Teachable and what it's like to work here. We've shifted that entirely to like a remote on-site packet, a lot of insights into how remote interviewing works, how Zoom works, some guidance on making sure your setup works beforehand, and a quick video tour of our office because nobody will be there for a while. So just to give them a little insight onto what it would be like if they were working at Teachable.
Definitely. And Charlie, how about you?
Yeah, so for us, our process, we morphed a little bit because typically for us, we were looking more to hire engineers central to New York, just because we do have a small team. We're about 92, 93 at Beeswax currently, with about 40 between tech and product. So for us, it was always a fairly tight-knit team, and being in office was super important just because a lot of what we do is fairly complex. And, if you need to get everybody in a room, that would be the easiest way. However, with COVID, all of us are now, remote in a way. So it's actually opened up our eyes to kind of look outside of just being in office. So now we're definitely a little bit more remote friendly. It's been working for us, and this has kind of been like a 3-4 month test run where, now we know that we can rely on remote engineers, and we can build the team out that way. So in terms of process for us, the only way it really changed was it used to be a lot of on-site whiteboarding. So you'd work through with one of our engineers. Typically we do, 3 to 4 1-hour sessions in an on-site. However, now we're leveraging CoderPad to do a lot of those interviews. So, hey, if things are going to be virtual, going forward, at least for the immediate future, I think things like, CoderPad, Zoom, even using some, virtual whiteboard technologies have been great for system design type questions. So for us, like, not too much has changed. Our hiring plan did somewhat shrink a little during COVID. However, we were lucky enough as well where a lot of our customers that we support are in, whether it be online gaming, also a lot of like big, social companies use us. So, and like, like I said, a lot of like native mobile gaming companies as well. So, we didn't take too bad of a hit. So yeah, we've been full steam this whole time. It's been a pleasure actually being remote and setting up those interviews because there's a lot more times available. And our engineers actually like it a little bit better. And same with interviewers too, because now you have the opportunity, instead of being on a whiteboard, to actually have your fingers on the keys. So I think like having that, that comfort or that familiarity with a computer in front of you does play a role in candidates actually doing a little bit better than they typically would on a whiteboard.
Definitely. And also would love to loop in Israel on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like Charlie and Jacob really hit it on the nose here in regards to not only how their companies have pivoted, but how every company, even here at the Times, in terms of our hiring strategy, we really just kept on full steam ahead. The Times is growing quite exponentially now. We're more than a newsletter. We're a digital media global enterprise with 6,000 employees globally and a number of different products under the Times company. And we have, I think, roughly around 170, 180 open jobs on our career site right now. I want to answer Nora Alexander's question that she dropped into the Q&A, because this is something that we've adapted a little bit given the current circumstances of working remotely. A lot of our job descriptions on our career site will list a particular location, New York City, et cetera. More and more hiring managers who I talk to, and I work specifically on the tech side, so these are all tech-specific hiring managers, are open for their candidates to be remote. So if we find really great talent in Kansas, Florida, Texas, et cetera, depending on how they do in the interview process, we're open for them being remote, since this is going to be a trend that we see in the tech industry going forward.
Definitely. And I think the fact that we are all learning in this process together, it really does inform how, our outlook in general, no matter what company you work for or what organization that you belong to, and how we move, how we all try to, put one foot in front of the other to take next steps. Really great feedback on our first Snap poll on from our audience. Thank you so much for answering. Single biggest problem you have with your job search today, 31% says the uncertainty of an employer following up your application. So I definitely can understand that. And, Israel, jumping back to you, how do you try to, follow up with people, if at all? I know the New York Times, huge organization. How do you try to do that?
Are you referring to following up to with individuals in regards to their application in general?
With their application, also after an interview.
Yeah, I mean, we will answer to every single candidate, and it's a feat, but we promise to do that, and that's our commitment from a recruiting perspective. And throughout the entire stages of the interview process, we will conduct things like prep calls with them, or give them other video interviewing tips and tricks, because it's a virtual video interviewing atmosphere that we're in now. For some of our, I would say, like maybe for some of our more entry-level roles, there are opportunities for us to like offer them a little bit more feedback, constructive feedback, so they can be a little bit more well-prepared in the second round of video interviews. Or after their technical assessment. For every tech role, there is some sort of online technical assessment, just to assess, obviously, their technical capabilities. So after that stage, there's some room for feedback in that process.
Great. And, Charlie, would love to, hop over to you on this and also double down on, this idea of what are kind of the metrics you need in order to really get noticed. Based on your experience, being involved in hiring on so many different levels, what are the top 3 things you look for in an application or resume for an entry-level technical role?
Absolutely. I just want to start off by saying I saw the poll as well come up. I couldn't vote, and that would have been my pick, as well as a frustration point, because hey, there's a lot of people applying for jobs currently. So, how do you make yourself stand out from the crowd, especially if it's recruiters looking at it? I think the most important thing for me, thinking wise, is really being able to, showcase and show some of your work. I think that's super important, especially, for those junior engineers looking to, get into those technical type positions. don't make it harder on the recruiter to see your work, right? And I always say this when we do any type of workshops or, work with recent grads. It's super important that, once you're done with school, you don't stop coding. You should be on, your GitHub should still be active. You should try to maintain some of those relationships with, maybe the students that you had worked, on different projects with during your schooling, or even if you're, this is the same goes for if you're in a boot camp, right? You're working on all these projects and they're super intensive. Like, keep them going. Don't just stop because, the course is over or you graduated. Have those examples to show. And I think it's important, that you do showcase yourself in several different ways. Obviously, if you want to do front end engineering, you should have some work that shows like your front end work. If it's, a back end position that you're looking for, make sure you're working with some databases, right? There's plenty of stuff out there in regards to like different types of public data that you could access and play with. There's really, no excuse for you not to be able to do it, especially when we're all locked up and cooped inside in this situation that we are now. So I think the most important thing is, hey, make sure those links are readily available. They're easy to click. Not that I have to go and copy and paste and, look all over the place for it. Make them bold, easy, clickable. It'll just give you that much better of an advantage to be seen and your work to be showcased.
Definitely. And then Jacob, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I'm going to reiterate a lot of what Charlie said, but have your code accessible and up to date. I think one thing that we consistently look for is, as a relatively rapidly scaling startup, like we want to see experience in more of an entrepreneurial or startup background. So a wide variety of internship experience and maybe experience across multiple stacks is something that's always a nice to have. Really the biggest thing is just like ability to ramp because obviously working in a full-time engineering capacity is going to be different than in a university setting. So we really want to see like closer to real world examples or have some kind of baseline confidence that somebody can ramp up in a new environment. I think in terms of standing out from the crowd, some little things that we've seen people do recently, even if it doesn't like require a ton of upfront work, is, if you have a site to showcase all your work, customize that to the company that you're applying for. Even if it's just like, hey, blank company, and that's the extent of the personalization, maybe with like a little thing in the URL. It's a great way to just kind of stand out, show you're putting in a little bit more effort in an application. And yeah, it just helps when you're dealing with high volumes of inbound applicants.
Definitely.
Could I add something to that real quick?
Sure.
Because it's something I often see, and I forgot to mention it. If there are specific projects that you do want people to look at, like please highlight those. Don't just put your full GitHub, because you might have some stuff from, ComSci 101 4 years ago that that might be, higher to the top, or, it might be something that gets looked at and, you want to be able to showcase and put your best foot forward. So if there is a specific project, make sure that's highlighted.
Very important, and I'm really glad that you brought that up. Second snap poll, thank you again for everyone answering. Really, really insightful on the resources and programs you've used to help inform or improve your job search. Wide-ranging responses, but I think the top three here would be, going to a coding or tech bootcamp program, watching how-to videos on YouTube on how to prepare for roles and for interview process, and then actively networking with industry professionals. Definitely the top three. And want to loop in Talia on the bottom one with networking with industry professionals. You have this really incredible meetup that really activates the whole community, and I'd love to learn more about how, not just how you were able to build this out, but how you were able to also include different perspectives to help inform applicants in the process of, what is, how do you best prepare for a technical role? How do you prepare for an interview, since you work with so many different folks in the community?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely started this meetup as a small study group, and it grew to be over 2,000 members in the past couple of months. What we do to help connect them with industry professionals is hold software engineering panels. So we've held two pretty big tech events where we bring in actually technical recruiters like Jacob, Charlie, and Israel, and also software engineers in the industry. And our members get to ask them questions, get to ask them advice about how to pretty much what we're doing here. So that's one big way that our meetup tries to connect them with industry professionals. I think more recently, because we typically mostly do just data structures and algorithms sessions, but most recently we had this huge hackathon about 2 weeks ago where we had a bunch of junior devs, I would say almost like 110 of them. And then we also had industry professionals come in, about 25 to 30 data engineers, product managers, senior devs, and designers come in to kind of interact with them and help them and basically project manage their teams and their projects, which I think was a really good way for them to meet them. I think in the future, when I do more hackathons, I think that's a great way to connect them because I see they're all now connected on LinkedIn. And I think that's a great way for them to meet.
Definitely. And for those of you who aren't involved in, a community organization or a meetup, it's definitely a great way to get knowledge and also to meet people who are in the industry who you may or may not be working for right away, but you may be colleagues with later on. So just to really build up your knowledge base, but also in the process, you're going to end up helping someone that you may not even know or may not know needs help. So great place to start those relationships, the meetup group. Israel, I want to jump back to you. From the poll, lots of different ways people are trying to get this exposure, get this knowledge. How does your team really go about recruiting for roles and being engaged with the community? Are you involved with boot camps or meetups like Talia's? What do you guys do?
Absolutely. Before I answer that, I want to echo what Talia said and the importance of networking, which will drive me into answering your question, Brian. But networking is incredibly important, especially for the folks who are in college here who have just recently graduated. Look for the alum from your college, see where they're at, look at their LinkedIn profiles if they're at a particular employer, see how else you can connect, how you can get connected to that particular employer and start networking with them. Odds are a lot of these companies have partnerships with other colleges or other organizations, such as like Line Run or Talia's organization. So there's so many ways to network here. So in regards to other efforts to network, there's so many groups on Meetup, like meetup.com, other boot camps. The one in particular, there's a boot camp right now. It's Insights Data Science that I'm particularly working with. I'm actually speaking on a panel with them next week with my chief data scientist. But they have, particularly for data science candidates, they have a really good boot camp. So that's one particular program that we partner with. But there's so many others. There's like Out in Tech has a number of different events and partnership opportunities, National Society of Hispanic Engineers, Women in Tech, etc. So there's a number of different opportunities to network.
Wonderful. We'd love to hear from Charlie on what you guys do over at Beeswax.
I always fall into that pitfall. I think from our side, really, we do a lot of meetups. We participate specifically around, we do a lot around like diversity, equity, or DE&I, really. So diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we do a lot with a couple women's groups. So NYC Pie Ladies, that's a big one for us. We've also done a lot in the DevOps community, just because here at Beeswax, a lot of what we do runs on top of AWS. So it's a little bit heavier on the infrastructure side. So we tend to at least have, 2 to 3 specific meetups a month. I know PyLadies actually uses our office on a bi-weekly basis for their study nights. So it's great to have that. And it's also great because it gives them exposure to our team, our office environment. We have mentors that, we work with some of these more junior engineers. And, I think for us, it's going to be a great thing. We're going to see kind of the fruits of that in the next, I'd say, maybe year to 2 years. So people that are, whether they're, getting their CS degree currently, at a local college, whether that be one of the CUNY schools. We also have a couple from like NYU and Columbia that come by, get involved. We do tech talks. We we provide some pizza and some other fun topics to talk about. So I think it really comes down to community. And if you could kind of give now for the future, I think it's a way to just, make New York Tech a stronger community in general.
Definitely. And Jacob, love to loop you in as well.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think we also host a lot of meetups. We posted the TypeScript meetup a few times at our office in New York. But I think in terms of like how we go about recruiting and connecting that back to networking, one thing we do quite a bit of for more like mid-level and senior candidates is honestly cold outreach. We will find people's emails, we'll send them an email inviting them to have a conversation with our CTO or one of our senior engineering managers. And I'd really suggest to expand your network when you are a junior level dev or coming right out of school. Reach out to people. You're going to get a lot of rejection. You're going to get emails that don't get back. But even if you send 10 emails and you get one person that writes you back that's open to a coffee or these days a virtual Zoom session, that's one additional connection. And you never really know where that can go. So I really lean on like any kind of connection you can make. Graduates from your school or folks who maybe worked with somebody that they've worked with in an internship, or even the loosest connection of, you saw something interesting on their LinkedIn. Try to find their email, send them a note asking them if they're open to like a 30-minute chat. These days, nobody's really doing much besides hanging out in front of their computers at home. So we've found our response rates on outreach to be going up the last few months. So I think the same would apply for folks looking for more mentorship as well.
Definitely. And I love the fact that, all of you really wrap this around networking, because that's really the core element and how things really get done when it comes to getting a job and also advancing in your career. So just hearing all the different perspectives really puts all of this into a really good understanding of how to do this and why it's so important. And speaking to that, Talia, you're not in an active recruiter role. You are actually working for an organization in that position of where a lot of our attendees, a lot of our listeners want to be at. So if you could just walk us through your process of how you were able to really prepare for your interview and then also prepare for the work that you're doing now.
Absolutely. So I just want to touch on what everyone else has said about networking in general. I think it's really easy to tell junior devs to go and have coffee chats and expect them to kind of like reach out to their network. But from my experience and my personal experience, when I did transition into software engineering, I transitioned from a residential real estate role. So I didn't really have a network of people in tech that I could reach out to. Luckily, I happened to rent an apartment to somebody who actually referred me to my current role at Yieldstreet. I think that was probably the only person I may have known in tech. So I just want to talk about how there is like a little bit of a disconnect between the junior devs and like their ability to reach out to people in the industry. And I think it's our job as community organizers of meetups and your jobs as tech recruiters to like really be, like kind of like what Charlie said, go out of your way to like facilitate these spaces where they can connect. In terms of how I prepared for my interview for Yieldstreet, lots of data structures and algorithms. I had an interview with Bloomberg before that, which obviously I didn't make, but for that I knew I had to study data structures and algorithms. And I just went at the books for 3 months by myself straight. And that's kind of how I did that, just because I felt like my boot camp, and many boot camps, as you'll hear from boot camp graduates, don't really get trained in data structures and algos. That's why my meetup focuses on that. So for Yieldstreet, the way I prepared, for Bloomberg, the way I was preparing was just doing data structures and algorithms, going to my own meetup to study, to form study groups. And then for Yieldstreet, just coding challenges, working in groups, facilitating, like I facilitate like a mini hackathon or a project portfolio thing with my meetup, so that we could all work on projects together. Because one of the biggest things I realize is that, you know, and I think, Brian, you know this very well because you work with a lot of people, and that gap between graduating and the actual job, like there's a lack of community, right? Like you just kind of end up like, they just pull the rug out from under you, and then you're just like kind of on your own, trying to do projects on your own. And that's really difficult because in boot camp and in the workplace, in both of those places, you don't actually do projects on your own, right? You're always working in a team. You're always working in that team format. So when technical recruiters kind of ask, hey, what have you been working on for the past few months? You know, it's like, it's hard to say like, yeah, I built this whole entire project. So I think it's really important in that interim to go to meetups, like I mentioned, and all of you have mentioned, like, and work on those projects, hopefully in group formats if you can.
Definitely, and 100% agree with everything you said, and especially when it comes to, you know, a group format, because face it, in reality, you're going to end up working in a group. That's just the way it is, and there's very few opportunities, and you know, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, that you know, you're going to own one specific thing, and you're going to be responsible for that one specific thing, and the only person responsible for that. So having the exposure to not just the communities and being able to you know, actively reach out and be engaged, but also simulate what it's going to be like to work in these environments is so important. And I think what you said also really confirms our latest results that says the single biggest issue folks have finding an industry mentor is they don't know where to look. And I really believe that the advice that we're sharing here in this space very much applies. You know, the meetups, the events, you know, if you are looking for a way to get in, seek the communities that have the relationships, because they've already done the groundwork. And having that direction really will help you push forward. And, you know, to that end, love to bring in Jacob on this, on, you know, constant interactions every day with applicants and trying to help them actively get the role and get the job, and to screen them and see what they have that can be valuable. You know, what are the 3 tips you have for contacting and building relationships with recruiters and mentors in tech?
Sure, yeah. In terms of contacting folks, I'd say do the same thing that recruiters do. I'm going to reiterate the same kind of message that I just gave on the last question, but I reach out to people I don't know all day long. I'll lean on the smallest connection I can, even if it's completely unrelated to work, and I'll just make an ask for an introduction. Really, you really need to be, you shouldn't be intimidated by that. You're gonna, again, face rejection when you're reaching out to a lot of folks, but if, again, 1 in 10 hits, you're good to go. And think also about the kind of asks that you're gonna make. So if it's about, even if you're looking for a mentor, maybe don't ask about like, hey, I saw this job on your site, can you refer me? Try to make it a lower ask, something that's like an easier sell for somebody, because, you know, if they don't know you, if they haven't worked with you, they might be a little cautious at first on just like referring you for an open position on their team or at their company. Try to maybe just ask for a coffee or a 30-minute chat. If they're, you know, LinkedIn is a great resource for looking for senior level folks across any industry. It's, again, what I use and spend way too much time on all day long, but it's a great place to kind of find more senior level talent. That's not quite 3, but
Definitely. And, you know, LinkedIn addict as well. Charlie, are you in the LinkedIn addict field?
Addicted. I'm addicted myself. But no, I think to compliment, you know, Jacob on what he said, definitely use LinkedIn. If you're a recent grad, use your, your alumni network, right? Maybe it's, finding, I think the most important thing is like figuring out also like what you want to do. And I know that's a funny, it's a little off topic from this exact question, but a lot of times people reach out and they're like, hey, like what jobs do you have? It's like, oh, like find a job, go on the boards, figure out exactly what job you're interested in and like center in around one of those jobs, especially if you're going to, reach out to alumni or play the LinkedIn game. Definitely have a plan going into it. It's like, it's the worst when I get reached out to and someone's like, hey, like what jobs do you have? It's like, oh, they're all up on the boards. Like, have a look. Which one do you think? Which one's for you? So I think coming with that information already is super important. I also think that setting reminders. So funny story, I was in the finance world and I became a recruiter because my boss, when the initial implosion hit in '08, told me, hey, go see my recruiter friend. He could help you get another job in finance. And there were none. I literally I hit him up religiously, like every 10 days on the calendar. I'd send an email and that's how I got a job as a recruiter. He's like, hey, you're pleasantly persistent. Have you ever thought of recruiting before? And I said, no way. And then I wound up doing it anyway. And now here's where I am. But I think being pleasantly persistent, because I don't mind that, like, especially if it's a good candidate and, there's potential, like I'll say, hey, I'm juggling so many balls at one time. It's sometimes, hard for me to keep that constant contact with, 100, 200 candidates at a time. So having that candidate actually reach out to me multiple times, it also helps me to know who that candidate is, right? So it's like, hey, if that perfect job does come up, I'm going to remember who that person is because I already have that relationship. So I think, make sure that there is follow-up. Even if you're getting rejection, I'd say follow up anyway, because you never know, hey, what day it is, what new job came out, or, maybe what that recruiter might even be working on that isn't even posted yet. So I think that's a good kind of game plan or plan of attack would be, consistent follow-up with those recruiters.
Definitely. And Israel, with how you try to handle your volume of folks that try to reach out for you uh, uh, with your position in the New York Times, how do you handle it?
Yeah, I love Charlie's message on being pleasantly persistent. That's super key. And I think, yeah, I mean, looking at the volume of candidates that we get, we have a number of different ways to track our candidates and keep them in pipelines for different tiers, et cetera. But one of the other ways that I found early on in my career to keep track with other mentors and gain other knowledge, when you, as a fellow LinkedIn addict, when you are on LinkedIn, on a user's profile, you can see the groups or clubs or interests that a user has associated themselves with. So one thing that I found doing, I think this is also when I was sourcing too, so I had the benefit of LinkedIn Recruiter, but you can also look at what a potential mentor's skills, interests, groups that they're a part of, and those could be some potential opportunities for someone who's starting their career to look into as well, to see like if they are, if they have an ideal mentor in a particular organization or a particular field or industry, see what groups they're associated with. And maybe this is a starting point for you if that person's not getting back to you on time. So I found that method helpful for me to just navigate mentorship and networking.
Definitely. And trying to, double down on what all of you said to this point, it's really important not just to be persistent, but to be purposeful in your communication. You want to not ask an open-ended question on, what jobs you have available, but really be intentional. What is it that you don't understand about the job description online? And is it something that you should still apply for even with your experience? Something like that, where it's more directed, where you can just have the ability to put yourself out there, but at the same time, invite a more engaging answer. And in that way, that's a really wonderful way to build a relationship with a recruiter, because now they know more about you. And you know, to that end, you know, Talia, being someone that applied for roles and didn't get them, you brought up the interview you had right before, you know, getting into Yieldstreet. What are the things that you've done to try to follow up with recruiters, or try to get more feedback, or even try to get a mentor out of that whole experience? What are things that you've done that you can share with our audience?
Okay, sorry about that. So definitely after I did not receive the role at Bloomberg, I know I followed up with their team. I wanted to make sure that if in the case in 6 months, I still didn't have a job and I wanted to reapply, I could still do that. I followed up with them to see, you know, how many months. I think different companies have different amounts of times where they can look for reapplication. So I think if you're really interested in a company and you want to work there, I think it's good to look into reapplication in the future. I don't know, you guys could probably speak on that more. And I think that's definitely something I did. Otherwise, like I wanted to get more information, but I don't know that they necessarily disclose like exactly why you didn't. I think that's just like protocol for them. So I think I just kind of tried to leave it on a nice note, you know, just pleasant for the future, just in case there is like another opportunity for me to reconnect with them. And I think that's important to kind of keep the lines of communication open and the bridges drawn. So.
Definitely. And I also think your experience speaks to what the audience right now is saying about what they feel would be more helpful when applying for jobs, something that a company can really offer. And overwhelmingly, it looks like a visual explanation of their vetting process on how that goes. So I want to pose it to my three recruiters. Is that something that's possible or that you do right now? Israel, looks like you want to start.
Absolutely. For a number of, really for all of our technical assessments, one of my main client groups is our data and insights group. And one of the core function of our technical assessment, specifically for our data insights group, is assessing on candidates' proficiency using SQL. And this is a very black and white test, right? So should the candidate fail, we'll give them the feedback on how and where they failed in the SQL assessment. But we also let all of our candidates know if they fail, they're eligible to retake the assessment in 90 days. So at the very least, these are areas where they can improve on in the next 90 days, whether they need to take another boot camp or some lessons online or what have you, depending on the reason of their rejection. But we do offer our candidates an opportunity to retake the assessment, particularly with SQL assessment, it's 90 days, a little uncertain about the number of days for the other assessments.
Great. Jacob, anything you want to add from your perspective at Teachable?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do our best to get back to every candidate with as much feedback as we can offer. But I'd say if you've been rejected for a company, reach out to, reaching out, I think, is always a good thing. And it is a through line in most of my answers, but reach out to the hiring manager because a lot of the times they're going to have a lot more insight than the recruiter on maybe where you slipped up from a technical perspective or where you can get better. And I'd also give it a little bit of time. You know, if you're rejected on a Monday and you reach out 10 minutes later, it's still very, very new. If you reach out like a week later or so, you might get a slightly better answer there.
Great. And Charlie, anything you'd like to add from your perspective at Beeswax?
Yeah, I think from our perspective at Beeswax, we always preach transparency, both about our business and just like our culture. So for us, I always make it a point to give candidates pretty raw feedback. And I always tell them, you know, upfront in the process, hey, you know, whether it's good, bad, you know, ugly, I'm going to tell you because one, you're putting in the time and effort to do these, you know, the technical assessments and the interviews. And two, you know, if it works, great, we're going to have you here. And if it doesn't, you know, you got to get better for, you know, what's next in the future. So, you know, we give, you know, pretty pretty unedited feedback when we talk to our or give those debriefs with our past candidates.
I think it's really wonderful that each one of you really takes the time to, figure out and to provide this feedback, because it's that uncertainty, and it was really expressed through the poll earlier, that uncertainty of, what is going on, what can I do better, and trying to have an answer for that. I think the feedback and the two-way street definitely help to, not just broaden the perspective of the applicant, but also I would imagine help your process as well in trying to figure out what worked or didn't work for the applicant to try to improve that experience later on. So we're going to move forward to a number of questions that we have through the audience here, and really great ones. So feel free to keep on submitting them. We'll answer as many as we can in the next 10 to 15 minutes. Nick is asking about junior engineers in the market right now based on what's going on with COVID. I believe some of you answered this earlier, but anyone want to follow up with Nick on specifically what's going on in the situation for hiring junior engineers?
Sure.
All right, Charlie.
Yeah, I'll give it a go. So yeah, I know that I've seen a ton of I've seen an influx of direct applicants at that junior level. I know that unfortunately, some of the bigger tech companies had put out offers and unfortunately had to rescind. So it's definitely, the market's there, but I also think that it's also going to come back, right? So like hiring was at an all-time high over the past year and a half, 2 years. And now we just see this drastic dip. However, everything is starting to come a little bit back to life slowly but surely. We're on that curve back. And when that curve does come back, the jobs will be there and they will open. So that's why I think like right now, if you are looking and you haven't found that job yet, like this is really, a critical time for you to kind of take some of the destiny into your own hands. Make sure you're doing that practice, get ready. Another thing from earlier that I just wanted to state is that, rely on those other connections that you've had, both, from school or mentors, and make sure that when you're doing
Charlie, you still there? Looks like froze out. While we work to get Charlie back, Jacob, anything you want to add to what Charlie was saying about junior engineers?
Sure, yeah. I think one of the points of the question was the market for junior engineers versus kind of mid-level engineers. And I'd say to be mindful in terms of the roles that you reach out and apply for. I think most companies have like a relatively good idea on the candidate profile that they're looking to bring in. So, if you're applying for a mid-level role that is calling for 3 to 5 plus years of experience, I'd really try to focus in on the companies that have open listings at the level where you're currently at.
Great. And I think we'll go to Israel on this next one. We have Altaf asking about advice you'd give to a boot camp grad. So not necessarily coming out of college, but coming out of a boot camp, and the fact that a lot of positions are asking for specific experience. How can they really convey what's going on, and how can they say that, I'm good for this job, I want to try to apply for it?
Yeah, absolutely. I would just really detail out your resume, your GitHub on the projects that you've worked on. If you've had prior work experience before the boot camp or other internship experience, really detail out how you were able to apply your technical skills. What was the impact? What were the results? Any other metrics that you could put in your resume that can help stand out. And then should you move forward to a recruiter screen, and this could also maybe help answer the other question around the junior devs as well, in terms of standing out to other senior devs. But should you move forward to that recruiter screen, one of the more qualitative aspects that we look for in any of our tech hires is really around passion and excitement, not only for the New York Times, but just passion and excitement for engineering, data, and the respect that you are applying for the role. So find areas where you can showcase your excitement, showcase your passion, how you're able to generate other side projects that you're working on, and the why behind it. Those are some of the other key differentiating factors when we're assessing a number of different candidates at all of our levels. But that's one key differentiating factor that we really take a look at.
Great. And Charlie?
Yeah, sorry about that before my internet dropped. I just want to make sure that you're talking, think about the problem and your approach, formulate something before you just jump into coding, especially on these interviews. And two, is don't be afraid to talk through it. Like, engineers and interviewers, they want to hear your thought process as you're thinking about code and writing about it, because it's almost like, we want you to show your work. That way you get the credit and the thought process, right? So, hey, maybe the code isn't exactly what it needs to be, but if you're making the right assumptions and along the right track, I think that does go definitely a long way in the end. But I actually have to hop off. So I wanted to thank everybody. If anybody has any questions or wants to speak further, feel free to link up with me on LinkedIn. And my direct email is just charlie@beeswax.com. So thank you all, panelists, everybody, Brian, everybody have a great one. Happy, safe, and sound 4th of July. All right?
Definitely. And thank you so much, Charlie. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Talia, would love to go to you on Brett's question about asking for a mentor. And because you actively work with folks in companies and also work with junior developers, junior engineers, how would you recommend, aside from going through LinkedIn or doing your research about the person, how would you go about approaching a mentor, and what types of intentional questions or what a way would you try to start that conversation?
So I think I got really lucky that my mentor ended up being our bootcamp prep instructor, because he offered private tutoring, and I definitely took him up on that. I was already paying so much for bootcamp. I thought that it would be worth the investment in education to have a private tutor. And he's basically been my mentor for the past year and a half. He used to work at an AR company, and now he works at Coinbase. So I think the way I approached it was to literally pay for one, because I know that the time of software engineers are expensive, and I know that they have a lot going on. And I think if anybody here can afford it, I think they could try to take on a private tutor, even if it's a session a month or a couple of sessions a month. I think investment in education is the best thing that you can put your money into. And I know a lot of people are doing that in general with their university education or their bootcamp education. So I know that has helped me a lot. I know I can just sort of text him sometimes whenever I just have any pressing questions, hey, Robin, how does this work? How does this work on GitHub? Is this a thing? Or, and he's always we've just created a really good relationship, just a friendship, And I think it's important, even if you have to pay them first, I think it's important to just kind of seek out those mentors, because in any industry, even when I was in real estate, I don't think I would have done as well as I would have without a mentor. And I know when I was at Full Stack and they had a tech panel, and I asked a question about mentors to other panelists, they all laughed at me. They said, oh, mentors in the industry, that's funny, and it's true. There's just not a culture of mentorship, and I think it goes back to what I said about, there being a disconnect between devs that are graduating and then people in the industry. And, at NYC Coders, I'm really trying to bridge that gap. I'm really trying to bring more industry professionals in to hopefully create that platform to have mentors in the industry actually like continuously help my devs as well as they look for jobs, and then also as they continue into their actual jobs, because I know I still hit up Robin and I'm like, hey, I need help with this like life cycle thing here, can you help me with that? So I think that's been very helpful for me. He's been on my tech panels, he's just constantly helped, and I know he's one of like, I maybe there's a lot of engineers in the industry that want to help in that way, and they just kind of don't know how to. They just don't have that like connection. And hopefully with NYC Coders, as I do more hackathons, I very much intend to connect as many industry professionals with junior devs so they can ask these questions and they can feel comfortable and just kind of like know a little bit more rather than feel like they're just kind of being hung out to dry. And I think that's one of the most important things, and something that I hope I can help change in the tech field. Because I think, again, there's a culture of just like, don't ask questions, just bang your head against the wall and just do this on your own and figure it out, which is great. I think that's great, and that has its merits because that's how you really learn and grow. But I think there's also like huge benefits to having a mentor where you can learn something like exponentially faster just by asking sometimes, and that short circuits your learning curve.
Definitely, and I agree with you that it is, you when you start trying to reach out to mentors, you do hit a wall. It's just a natural thing, and I think it's a matter of how you navigate and kind of like take a couple steps back and navigate around it, and see what are the things that worked, what are the things that don't. One thing that I like to add, we only have a few more minutes, but one thing I like to add is, when I'm reaching out to mentors and folks to work with students, we work with. I always try 3 different ways of reaching out to people. One through LinkedIn, because it really focuses in on the message. One through email, because I can really get out what is it that we're actually trying to do. And then the other way is I try to send something really interesting to their Twitter. So one way or another, I'm going to see which one works. And it's so difficult because when you think that you have something that works, someone else answers the other thing, and then the other thing drops off a week. So it's a matter of, you have to keep on investing time on trying different things. And I think that's really what this comes down to, is get out of your comfort zone, push the boundaries, and try different things.
Sorry, Brian.
Yeah.
And I just want to reiterate, like, I think there are a lot of software engineers in the industry that want to help. I think, like, just from my last hackathon, I learned we had like almost 25 to 30 industry professionals that joined on to volunteer. And I think that, like, through your line run and places like NYC Coders, I think it's important to, make sure that we connect those people with devs. So just reiterating that.
Yes, definitely. We have time for 2 more questions, and we're going to go with 2 of the questions that are here in the chat. Jacob, I think this would be really interesting on algorithms from Altaf. He's asking about what skills should he be practicing, and what's the plan that he should really be subscribing to, aside from going after and trying to work with organizations and being a part of them and being engaged. How should he be approaching this?
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of companies take a lot of different approaches to technical vetting. So I don't think there's just one answer that applies universally here. But I think, the classic resources of like cracking the coding interview or Elite Code are great places to start. But then, if you're getting to the technical rounds in interviews, you've probably had a conversation with a recruiter to start. Ask, just straight up, what kind of technical questions will you be covering? Where should I be focusing my time in preparing? To your point, Brian, recruiters want for folks to get the job. They might not tell you the exact question that they're gonna ask, but they're gonna give you some guidance on kind of where to focus your time.
Definitely. In Israel, love to loop you in as well.
Absolutely, definitely ask. Don't hesitate to ask the recruiter or the assessor if it's a live assessment and you have an opportunity to have another interviewer on the video chat since it will be virtual. Ask the interviewer if there's any immediate feedback as well. This is an opportunity to talk to someone who's at the organization right now. So take advantage of that.
Great. And the final question we're going to ask through the webinar, Barawan is asking about visa sponsorships and the roles of your respective businesses. Hot button issue. I'd love to get both of your perspectives on this. Israel, I think we'll start with you.
At the Times, we're still open to hiring folks who require visa sponsorship. So through our immigration team, we will work with what we have to see what we can do.
Jacob?
Similarly, our CEO went through the visa process himself, so we've always been very open to it. I think it's a pretty fast evolving situation more broadly, but we've always been open to trying to figure out however we can make something happen.
Great. So, you know what, we're going to answer one more here from Nora. It's really interesting because we've been talking about junior devs a lot in this discussion, and I think her perspective, her question is really interesting. She's been in the industry for a while, hasn't been involved with startups. Does that help or hurt your chances if you've had this wealth of experience in being hired for a role that may be a step down in order to kind of like relaunch? Is that something that you would say that is, a good thing, or something that maybe you have to look elsewhere? How would you approach this? Jacob, we'll go to you first.
Sure, yeah. I think it's something that's a great thing. I think, we've had success with folks who maybe at more senior levels were coming from, VP level roles at organizations, moving into manager roles or even IC positions. I think the only thing to note is if you are taking a step back or, lateral move from a responsibility perspective, to be mindful that compensation might not always align with where you were. If you are taking a step down in responsibility or trying to shift where your focus is.
Definitely. In Israel?
Sorry, I was scrolling through the Q&A and I saw a question that I just really wanted to answer because I was helping another friend out on their resume literally this morning. But what to answer your question in regards to what Nora said on years of experience in tech startup, even if I think it's great, right? Experience is experience, and it's going to be highly beneficial. Even at larger companies at the Times, there are some senior roles where we look at, does this individual have substantial startup experience? Because it does take, there is a level of wearing multiple hats and juggling priorities and managing teams cross-functionally at a higher rate or higher speed of productivity that we're going to look for in this particular role. So it is really helpful.
That's great. And, we're going to wrap it up here, but, I can't thank all of you enough. Charlie, who left us a few minutes ago, Jacob, Israel, Talia, for joining us, sharing your perspectives. I hope for those of you watching and those of you who participated, you're able to really get some really actionable wisdom and insights you can use and apply to your own situation. We purposely tried to give you completely different perspectives on things so that you can get the whole you can see the whole picture, and I hope that was conveyed through the event today. Before we leave all of you, want to share a little bit about what we're doing at Line Run, some stuff you may be interested in. So we just did this event on software engineering. If that's something you're interested in seeing, send me a message. I will send you the video. Really incredible session we had with folks from Twitch, Bloomberg, Stack Overflow, really incredible stuff. Our next Future of Tech event is on data science. Definitely something in demand and something that everyone sees growth in. So that's the middle of July. And then UX and design is towards the end of July. The links are up. Just feel free to click the button, register, and we look forward to seeing you there. Otherwise, we will follow up this video with publishing the recording, Zoom willing, in a few days. Those of you attending, you'll get a follow-up email, including everyone's LinkedIn, so you can connect with everyone individually. Really happy to be able to bring all of these great people together, and I hope everyone was able to learn something great from it. Thank you so much for participating. Remember to check out New York City Coders, Talia's group, really incredible community, especially if you're in the New York area. They just did a hackathon, really incredible results. So check them out. Israel, Jacob, and Charlie, always responsive on LinkedIn. I know personally because that's how I connected with them. So use my example, connect on LinkedIn, and have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Yeah.